In this video, we're going to talk about finish colors, which we've dealt a little bit with this already because we've been selecting finishes for our panels and board stocks and different hardwares. But the main thing that finish colors is going to be used for is if you're doing different stain colors or different paint colors on your cabinet. So what I mean by that is I can go to finish and I can see all of the system colors here, just a lot of different random colors, and I can also add new ones. So what if I want to add a green color? How do I, do I just kind of guess what this is and then give it a name? I'm going to show you how I used to do it, and for me, even if you're not rendering, I think it's still well worth taking the time to do this. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're doing a Sherwin-Williams color. I'm going to pull up a URL, and we have this SW6745 called Lark Green. And now Sherwin-Williams will sometimes actually just straight up list the RGB color, which is pretty awesome. So if I type in 138.193.161, which I'll just go do, I'm going to call it SW6745 Lark Green. I can match this color exactly if I type those details in. So let me do that now. 138.193.161. So you can see RGB is just red, green, blue values. And for me, just dragging the slider around trying to guess the color was just not very easy. And so, like I said, even if you're not rendering, I love having accurate colors in here. And now what happens if you're on a website that doesn't list the RGB color? Because Sherwin-Williams has a massive website and sometimes it's hard to find the page that actually has the RGB color. Well, let me introduce you to this awesome tool. If I just open a new tab and go Chrome Color Picker extension, and I like to use ColorZilla. There's a couple different ones here, but go to ColorZilla and hit Add to Chrome. And you can click Add Extension, and it pops up a little menu here. And then, very important step, you'll want to hit the Bookmarks tab and pin this to the top up here. Now, this is pretty incredible. So now whether you're using Sherwin-Williams or just looking at a picture they sent you, rather than relying on the website to give that to you, I can just go up to my color picker, hover over a certain area of the website. Notice how it changes as I hover over it. So if I click here on the Lark Green and then go into my color history, this also gives me the RGB color. And you'll notice it's exactly the same. So now I'm not relying on the website to give me this. Any color on any website I can match. And so again, may not be, I think it's pretty cool, and so again, even if you're not rendering, you may as well, in the time it takes you to add the finish color anyways, this is probably faster anyways, and so in my opinion, since you have to add the color anyways so that it shows on reports and different things, you might as well make it accurate. It just looks better in the job and everything. Okay, let's minimize this and go back to Cabinet Vision, and I'm going to go into a job and just put a cabinet on the wall, and we'll put a wall cabinet, and then I'm going to go to the 3D tab. And if I go to the Finishes tab and change the Assembly Exterior, I can do two things. First of all, I could search for my SW color called Lark Green, and that looks nice. Or I can also add new finish colors from directly within the job. So I don't have to close out, go to the materials, go to finish colors, and add it from back there. I can hit new from right inside of a job. And like I said, you can do that through the 3D tab. The color can also be chosen at the room level. If I go to Room Finishes, I can choose a color here, but notice you can't add a color from here. So if you want to add a color while you're in a job, you do have to go to the 3D tab, Finishes, and then hit the new button from there. So hopefully that little trick is going to be useful for you to be able to input the color correctly. In this video, we're going to talk about textures. So if I go into Materials and go to the Texture Library, you can see some of the stock textures that come with Cabinet Vision. There's a few wood textures, there's a few countertop textures, and just a few different things. Most of these leave a lot to be desired, but there's some starting points in here. So what I want to do is I want to add a wood texture, kind of like we did with this. So what I want to do in this video is add a wood texture and just explain some of the things that are important to know when you're adding textures. So I'm going to just create my own category here just to keep things separated. I'm just going to call it CE Wood, and I'm going to import one texture. So I'm going to click New, Import. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I put a folder on here from my store that has some of the seamless wood textures, and it looks empty. So right now it's filtering for BMP files. I want to switch it to JPEG. Now, if you've found an image online or somewhere and it's a PNG or a different file format, you will have to change this to JPEG or BMP, which you can just Google online if you're not sure how to do that. So I'm going to scroll through here and just find, I'll do cedar. And I'll say CE Cedar. You can give it any name you want. And there's two settings here that are important. If we choose tile, we have to enter our tile size. So let's say I wanted to tile every 40 by 40 inches. And this is important because, like in my case, I have a square image, so I want my tile to be the same. If yours is more of a rectangle image, you might do 40 by 60 or, something that's proportionally accurate to the image aspect ratio that you have. Now, tile essentially means that instead of like stretching and distorting the image to match the part size, the image will always look the same no matter how big the part is. And it's just going to tile every 40 by 40 inches. Now, I love using tile if it is a wood grain, but you do have to be careful with this because if your texture is not seamless, this will end up looking worse than if you just leave it unchecked and let it stretch the fit part. There's some things you have to be careful of, but if you do find a seamless image, you'll want to check that, and then you can play with the size. Some images might look better at 20 by 20 or 40 by 40, or you just gotta kind of play with the numbers to see how big or how small the grain should look. I've played with this earlier, and I think around 30 or 40 is a pretty good starting point. Decal means it will not blend with the finish color. So even if I pick a bright blue, it's still going to be this kind of grayscale wood texture look. And so in the case of wood species, I do not want decal check because I want, if I pick a light or dark stain, I want it to blend with this texture color. And that's exactly what it would do when it's unchecked. So a good use case for when to check decal is like a countertop or like an Egger texture or something that is what it is. Like there's no changing it based on what finish color is selected. Okay, so let's click OK. And now let's go look at this in a job. And notice I don't have any cedar materials. And remember how we hard-coded all of our materials to have certain textures and to have certain finish colors? Let's look what happens when I go to a new job and try to select my new texture. So you'll notice still has that same cherry looking texture, right? Well, that's because it's still using the cherry material schedule. And even if I change the texture manually from the 3D tab, if I go to Textures, Assembly Exterior, find my new texture, and change it, nothing changes. And that's a really good thing because if this finished end is made out of cherry, I don't want this to be overridden with some random cedar texture. So it's a really good thing, but it can be annoying because sometimes you just want to see what you want to see. But let's look at how we can get our cedar to show up. So if I was doing a cedar wood, I would need to create some cedar materials. So I want to go ahead and do that, and I'll just kind of skim through it so you don't have to watch the entire thing, but I'm just going to copy some of my cherry materials and call it cedar everywhere that I see cherry. So I'll copy my 3/4 two-sided cherry. I'm going to get rid of the alias. And so this becomes cedar. This becomes cedar. And I'm going to change the texture for my new cedar color. So in order to actually see our new texture, in the next section for diving deeper into material schedules, I'll actually add cedar as my example, and we'll go through copying all of our cherry stuff and making a new selection that we can choose from called cedar. So for now, we have our texture loaded up and it's ready to go. We just need a material to assign it to. And if I go back to material and texture, obviously we can add all different types of textures. It could be countertops, flooring, different wall textures, or sometimes even outdoor scenes that you can apply to windows. There's a lot of different options, especially once you get into rendering, that becomes more and more important. Now, one other note that I might add, if you have a whole lot of images, you don't have to do them one by one. So for example, if I click New and import textures and go to my desktop and switch it to JPEG, let's say I want to select 5 of them or 6 of them. Click the first one, hold Shift, and click the last one, it does a bulk select. And then I can click OK, and it's going to load them all at once. So I could pick my settings, and this is assuming that my settings are the same, but this can definitely save some time if you're working on importing a lot of different images. So that's all for the texture video. In this video, we're going to talk about organizing folders in the material library. And to me, this is very important because it makes things easier to find, easier to apply materials in the material schedules, and just overall just avoids the clutter. And so this is my suggested method, just kind of putting all of your materials such as plywood, board stock, banding, or if you do laminates or put all the things that you will actually like be cutting and machining up here in the materials section, put all your hardware stuff together, and then throw everything else into an other category. And I really like this method. You might find you need more groups or more separation. That's totally fine. This is just a starting point. Now, some people actually take it a step farther and make group inside of panel stock. They might have a cherry and whatever else, and you can do that. I would rather use the filter or the search for species specific things rather than the folders, because what happens is when you go into your material schedules, now you have to start opening a whole lot of different folders just to get into the cherry folder. And so my personal preference is try to keep it at 1 or 2 levels rather than trying to go too deep in the nesting. But again, it's going to vary shop to shop. I've also seen people do more of like brand specific things. If you order from different companies, and you want to separate it that way, you can definitely do that. So just get familiar with how these folders move around using the left and right and up and down. If I want to move it, make banding a main category, I just move it to the left, and now it's one of the main categories along with material and hardware. And if I want to nest it underneath, move it back to the right, and then I can move it up and down. So just play around with the folders, figure out what works for your shop, and try to be neat and organized, because over time you will get hundreds, if not thousands, of materials in your library. In this video, I want to talk about the material filters option. And I'm a big fan of setting these up for species and different things, because it makes it much easier in the material schedules if you can just click cherry and see everything related to cherry, or pre-finish and see everything related to pre-finished. So I'll show you how I like to set mine up. And to do that, I'm just going to delete the cherry filter and re-add it, because I don't have a lot of materials here yet. So I'm going to click the new filter. They actually call it a search. I think of it as a filter. And I'm going to click the new search. Copy doesn't really do anything because it doesn't even pull these values in. So most times I just hit new, and I'll just call it cherry. And then we have to tell it what it should search on. So I like to use description, because in my opinion, name is too unpredictable and there's too much going on. So I use description, and I like the regular equal to, not similar to or not starts with. I like equal. And that's why on the last several videos here, I was so adamant about making the description exactly the species name, because of this filter thing. Because that way I know if something is exactly equal to cherry, it's going to show up. And some people might say, well, why wouldn't you just use similar and just let whatever shows up show up? Well, and that can work, and you can definitely experiment with that. But if I'd create like an oak search, and there's red oak and white oak and stuff, I don't want to chance things showing up that aren't related to what I'm trying to search on. So myself, I'd rather make it exactly equal and then just control it. Because you'll notice if you click the filter and you're not seeing something, it's probably because the description's wrong. So for example, if I put cherry board here, that's no longer going to show up in my filter because I'm searching on exactly that. And so if I want something to show up, change it back to cherry and it's going to be in there. And so I think it's a nice controllable way to have these species specific filters up at the top here. And to my knowledge, there's not a way to reorganize these. So if order is important to you, you might want to get your whole list together and get them all created at one time, because you can't reorganize these after the fact. In this video, I want to talk about the material filters option. And I'm a big fan of setting these up for species and different things, because it makes it much easier in the material schedules if you can just click cherry and see everything related to cherry, or pre-finish and see everything related to pre-finished. So I'll show you how I like to set mine up. And to do that, I'm just going to delete the cherry filter and re-add it, because I don't have a lot of materials here yet. So I'm going to click the new filter. They actually call it a search. I think of it as a filter. And I'm going to click the new search. Copy doesn't really do anything because it doesn't even pull these values in. So most times I just hit new, and I'll just call it cherry. And then we have to tell it what it should search on. So I like to use description, because in my opinion, name is too unpredictable and there's too much going on. So I use description. And I like the regular equal to, not similar to or not starts with. I like equal. And that's why on the last several videos here, I was so adamant about making the description exactly the species name, because of this filter thing. Because that way I know if something is exactly equal to cherry, it's going to show up. And some people might say, well, why wouldn't you just use similar and just let whatever shows up show up? Well, and that can work, and you can definitely experiment with that. But I'd create like an oak search, and there's red oak and white oak and stuff, like I don't want to chance things showing up that aren't related to what I'm trying to search on. So myself, I'd rather make it exactly equal and then just control it. Because you'll notice if you click the filter and you're not seeing something, it's probably because the description's wrong. So for example, if I put cherry board here, that's no longer going to show up in my filter because I'm searching on exactly that. And so if I want something to show up, change it back to cherry and it's going to be in there. And so I think it's a nice controllable way to have these species specific filters up at the top here. And to my knowledge, there's not a way to reorganize these. So if order is important to you, you might want to get your whole list together and get them all created at one time, because you can't reorganize these after the fact. So as you continue to use Cabinet Vision, you'll probably be importing packages from the forum and different things you've purchased. And so one thing that I think deserves an entire video is making sure to clean up after you import packages. So I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to go to Utilities and import my X Series rollout package, and then I'm going to show you how I'd recommend to clean up after that. Okay, so we can see in this package there are a few materials such as drawer guides and board stock coming in. So this is going to be a good example. We're going to see how a new folder gets added in my material library. So I'm going to go ahead and import this. Okay, so let's go look what this did. If I go to materials, you can see it created a folder based on the name of my package. Now, just one isn't that big a deal, but over time, as you import 5, 10, 15 different packages, you don't want your materials scattered out over all of these folders. It's just hard to maintain. So whenever you import a package, if it has materials in it, go look what the materials are and then scatter these out more appropriately in your already created folders. So for example, my rollout package comes with a set of example guides. So if I want to keep those, I should move those to my drawer guide category. If I don't want to keep them, I should just delete them right then and there. Now my bracket, I don't really have a good folder for this. So I might just move this whole X Series rollout for my pilaster and my bracket. Just kind of move that right underneath hardware. So if there's not a good fit, it's okay to make a new folder, but just kind of distribute it into your main structure of folders and then clean all this up. So now we don't have any materials here. Now I can start using this delete group. It won't let you delete unless you get rid of the materials inside. But that's the go, to always get back to this deleted as the bottom folder. And so I think, like I said, I think this deserves a special video, because when I've logged in and helped people with Cabinet Vision, sometimes their material library is just a disaster. And so we want to keep this clean, because like I said, there can be a lot of different materials and we need to do our best to keep it organized early on.